You know, this is September. Being September, it is a really cool time for many people who are fans of Robert E. Howard. If you're in booktube land, you're probably familiar with Michael K. Vaughan. They call it Sumerian September. But coming up in October is Occult Detective October. So for Wordsmith Wednesday, I want to share with you a very interesting person whose work itself is remarkable as a writer, and who, because he was part of maybe the first phase of fandom, along with Robert E. Howard and others, and because he was a fan of people like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith and others, he helped keep alive some of the work of the great fantasists over the years. So let's turn our attention to a little something fun for Wordsmith Wednesday and head on into booktube land by hearing from the control voice for Outer Limits. We'll remove that. Okay, so we get to start again. That was interesting. Thanks, Russians. They're saving my bacon. Right? It's us. They're the ones who are doing it. I pressed the wrong one. All right, let's go with the Outer Limits opening. Here we go. Control voice. All right.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
All right, good stuff. The correct video. I like it. Thank you, Russian team. Always got to spread the right Outer Limits Russian propaganda because, of course, we are very red inside. Right, Russians? Okay. All right, so let's get into it right now, everybody, as we head into booktube land and talk about another really great writer whom I would like to suggest, maybe if you're interested in some reading, read some of this person's stuff and think about what this person did on the publishing side and editing side of things that actually helped an entire genre grow and many more people get involved with it. I'm talking about something, give you that word in just a minute, but first, that it's a follow-up to a series of recommendations that we've given on Wordsmith Wednesday, you might recall. So, for example, I spoke about Charlie Chan and the creator of Charlie Chan a few weeks ago. Very interesting stuff from a guy who actually used to live around Boston, Earl der Beggars, and then on a trip to Hawaii was so impressed by Hawaii and a Hawaiian detective decided he would write a character called Charlie Chan, showing an Asian immigrant on the West Coast who was a great detective. We also spoke a little bit about fantasy writer, actually sword and sorcery writer, John Morrissey, who lived in New Hampshire, was a professor at Franklin Pierce College, and wrote some great series of 4 novels and great short stories. And there's a really cool short story called The Timekeeper that you can find over at YouTube. And it's a wonderful, wonderful story. And somebody actually mentioned in the audience that when they were a kid in school, their teacher had them read that short story. So this is the book Iron Brand, and you can find this is the first of a series. So we talked about John Morrissey. We also talked about Dan Simmons and his great work in horror and science fiction. This is his first big release, The Song of Kali, a great opening that we got to read, and that was fantastic. As you know, I've edited books for Borderlands Press that collected a certain small number of short stories in the Little Book on Robert E. Howard. And that was absolutely fascinating, really cool. And I've also edited one that collects short stories by E.F. Benson. And they're both sold out, which is kind of neat. And as we come towards October, a lot of people in BookTube land are picking up on Michael Vaughn's suggestion that it's Occult Detective October. So people will be reading about occult detectives, not just detectives, but occult detectives. Now, one of the big things about occult detectives is that a lot of them arose around the same time as Sherlock Holmes. So you got Jules de Grandin and others that popped up because Holmes was very popular, but at the same time, occultism was growing. In fact, Arthur Conan Doyle was fascinated by that. He was friends with Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini was a skeptic and debunked a lot of the seances and stuff, but Arthur Conan Doyle, a medical doctor, a scientist, was fascinated by the occult and actually put some stock into some of it, right? So all sorts of fascinating things. And they were friends. They were friends. So as we go into Occult Detective October, get closer to it, I want to remind people about one of my favorites, and we'll discuss him more in the future. He's not really recognized as an occult detective, really, but he is. He's Carl Kolchak, the Night Stalker. This is a redo of the original novel by Jeff Rice, which was never actually published until Universal and Dan, what's his name, produced the film for ABC television. And then they picked it up. They bought the rights to it. Richard Matheson wrote, Dan Curtis. Richard Matheson wrote the original Night Stalker script. That was a huge success. Richard Matheson then did all his own work with an original story and an original script for the second television movie of The Night Strangler, where Carl Kolchak goes to Seattle and experiences something amazing, having left Las Vegas, being driven out by events of the first movie. You can see they've got Las Vegas in the background there. Kolchak was a reporter, but he fit the template of the great occult detectives. And there, we have Joseph Payne Brennan. Joseph Payne Brennan has a character he created who is an occult detective, and Joseph Payne Brennan is the Watson. He's actually in the stories in Connecticut. And I just want to show you a couple things because Michael Vaughn recently talked about how he's going to be reading the original Kolchak, the Night Stalker, the unpublished novel, which eventually was published. And there is a new version that has the Night Stalker and the Night Strangler in one volume. You can get that. It's been reissued. The original Night Stalker book, the paperback, is very expensive now. And there's one that's even more expensive than that. And that is the publication of the Night Strangler novelization. This, curiously enough, went the other way. It went from Richard Matheson's script to giving Jeff Rice the ability to write the novelization of Matheson's script. This is, I don't know how much this must cost now, but if you try to find this, it's virtually impossible to find it. It's been reissued, but this is the novel that was released after the second Kolchak television film. Both of them were, for a long time, in the top 5 of all-time viewership for television films, these ABC movies of the week that they did. Dan Curtis had massive success, and of course, they then spun that off to turn Kolchak into a nightly episodic TV show, which essentially in the shadows was kind of executive produced as time went along by Darren McGavin, who also starred and acted as a script editor. He had to handle a lot of stuff because things started to drop off from the network. So he had to pick up a lot of the slack himself, put a lot of his own money into it to keep it going. And some wonderful stories, great stories. And the man who created The Sopranos actually was working in his early days on Kolchak, the Night Stalker. So a very interesting group of writers who came around there. And as I mentioned in a comment on Michael Vaughn's YouTube channel, when he mentioned Kolchak, one of the interesting things that I've mentioned before, and I'll show you when we do a larger segment on Kolchak, You know how nowadays fans of Alien and Blade Runner mention that if you look closely at some of the Blu-ray things and some of the things in the background, the Alien universe, directed by Ridley Scott, of course, the first movie, and the Blade Runner universe, directed by Ridley Scott, based on the Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, they've connected the two universes. And so you have replicants in Blade Runner. You've got cybernetic organisms or some sort of organisms now in like the Alien TV show, Alien Earth. You've got essentially that they're sort of growing humans and they're implanting them with human thoughts and so on. So is it still the same person with their psychology put into this new body or not? What is it, right? So very interesting stuff. But the Tyrell Corporation is the link between those two universes. And they made it very overt now in the television series. And you can only see it in the background on some of the things in Alien and in the Aliens Blu-ray as well. The Tyrell Corporation was in Blade Runner. That's the corporation that created the replicants like Roy Batty and so on that Harrison Ford's character is hunting. And they use them as slave labor and soldiers and things like that. They give them a limited lifespan. And so the whole idea of Blade Runner is that a group of these replicants who have been created, they want more life. They want to live longer. They love their lives and they don't want to die. And so they've gone rogue. And now this guy has to hunt them down because they're considered dangerous. And it's quite an amazing story about, the limits of life, the human condition. It's a great movie. The Blade Runner is so good. It's really one of the tops for me. So interestingly enough, if you go back to Kolchak, now the couple that wrote the Blade Runner script is a married couple. Their last name is Peoples, David Peoples, and I can't remember his wife's name, Linda or Mary Peoples. I'm not sure. I think that they saw Kolchak the Night Stalker, and they saw an episode called Mr. Ring. Now, spoilers, Mr. Ring was one of the episodes of the series after the TV movies for Night Stalker, where Mr. Ring was actually a story about these military guys at like a DARPA-like group, and they're getting knocked off. And so the reporter, Carl Kolchak, goes to investigate it, and he discovers that somewhere in Illinois, it was based in Illinois, the story. He was a reporter in Chicago. Eventually, he went to Chicago and worked for the International News Service, the INS, under Tony Vincenzo. But you discover that it's a robot that they have created to be basically a killing machine, a warfare robot. And the woman who was intimately involved with the programming of the robot actually exposed it to ethics and philosophy. And so it realized that it was being used for bad, and it then went after the guys who were trying to use it for evil purposes. And that's what Kolchak uncovers. And the research institute where all this was happening, this DARPA-like institute, is the Tyrell Institute. He actually drives by the sign in his convertible Mustang. And I've taken a screenshot. I might have shown it about a year ago here on the show. So I mentioned that to Michael. I haven't seen if anybody's responded to that yet. But I have a feeling that when the Peoples wrote sounds like Cosby, when the Peoples wrote the Blade Runner script, I think they used Tyrell intentionally because they had seen Mr. Ring, which is an anagram for robotic, something, intelligence, something or other, from Kolchak a few years before that, like 7 years before that. And I think that's why it's in there. So it's possible, if you really want to draw it out, that the Alien universe, the Blade Runner universe, and Carl Kolchak are all in the same fictional universe. And of course, the reason I bring up Carl Kolchak is because Occult Detective October is coming up. And so don't forget, if you want to try to find this one, it's going to be really, really hard to get it. It's going to be very expensive. Like, I'm a massive fan of Kolchak. Like, I have a lot of ideas. If I get healthier, I want to do some really cool Kolchak stuff. I got to get the rights to do it. But we talked a lot about those things. And there's another occult detective team that I want to mention to you. One of the early writers we mentioned on Wordsmith Wednesday was my old friend Chris Fowler, who's passed away. Great, great guy. And just remember the Brian and May Mysteries. Very good stuff. They start off the stories around World War II in a sort of flashback, and they're older looking back on some of their adventures. Bryant and May, great stories. So one of the most famous occult detectives comes to us from an author who was not only a big fan of the fictional horror things and so on that were around at the time when he was alive, but also really got started as a fan of Sherlock Holmes. His name was August Derleth. And August Derleth created a character named Solar Pons, P-O-N-S, Solar Pons. Essentially, what Solar Pons is Sherlock Holmes. He's got an assistant. He lives not too far from Sherlock Holmes. And so I want to give you some background information on Solar Pons. So first off, let me just show you this. There's a very interesting paperback. I actually have a hardcover version of this as well. That was edited by Hugh Green, came out in Penguin years ago. This is sort of a beat-up extra copy that I have, called The Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. And in this, you'll see a lot of those detectives that were either regular detectives at the time, inspired by Conan Doyle or Edgar Allan Poe, or they were supernatural detectives. So here you'll see people like Guy Boothby, Clifford Ashdown, and a little further inside, you'll see people like William Hope Hodgson, Carnacki, many others, okay? One of the big ones is Solar Pons. Here's another one. There's Fighters of Fear for the supernatural detectives, okay? So lots of great ones in here from all sorts of different writers. But the reason Solar Pons exists is quite interesting. So let me give you some background information about this character, this man, no longer with us, who not only was a very fine writer, but also, if it weren't for him, much of H.P. Lovecraft's work would have pretty much disappeared. It would have only been in pulp magazines like Weird Tales. Maybe people had copies of those. But instead, this man named August Derleth founded Arkham House, like Arkham, Massachusetts, which is the cipher for Salem. And Arkham House published almost everything that H.P. Lovecraft produced and a lot more. He was born in Wisconsin, as you see here on Fantastic Fiction. 1909. I want to do honor to August Derleth. And if you're just listening in audio, it's D-E-R-L-E-T-H. August Derleth was one of the founders of Arkham House. Born in Sioux City, Wisconsin, he continues to be Wisconsin's most prolific author more than 30 years after his death. His place in American literature will only be enhanced by the discovery of 40 new manuscripts yet to be published. Adding these to his already 150 books, Derleth's place in American literature continues to evolve and grow. And you can see he wrote by other pseudonyms: Michael West, Tally Mason, and Stephen Grendon. And look at this. He's got so many different series. The Judge Pick series, Sac Prairie, stories about Wisconsin, and the mighty Solar Pons. The Adventures of Solar Pons, looking very much like someone you might know in a deerstalker cap and rain slicker on a London street in Victorian London, the 1800s. There's a hardcover version of some of the collected first Adventures of Solar Pons by August Derleth. It's going for $55. And I want to mention that a friend of mine and his brother have formed a publishing company that releases these new versions, which have been updated, of Solar Pons books. You can find them right there. Go over to Amazon and you'll see right here, David Markham has helped update these things. And so I want to give a tip of the hat to Belanger Books and my friend Brian Belanger, whom I last saw, he and his wife at an Adamant show. And then the last time I saw them before that was at the Damned 35th anniversary show. Great taste and wonderful covers, Solar Pons. Now, Solar Pons, like I said, was a Victorian detective, just like Sherlock Holmes. He was a genius. And Solar Pons, interestingly enough, arose because of August Derleth's fandom for Sherlock Holmes. Now, what's the story about this? Let me give it to you. I've written up a little white paper for the people who are fans of the fiction, so I want to go over to that right now. Born on February 24th, 1909 in Sioux City, Wisconsin, August William Derleth emerged as a prolific American writer, editor, and anthologist whose contributions span genres from detective fiction to cosmic horror. Growing up in his small German-influenced village along the Wisconsin River, Derleth's early life fostered a deep love for literature, particularly the works of Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, check this out. You remember, I was 14 submitting stories to Twilight Zone magazine. They would get rejected, but Carol Serling would write little words of encouragement in pencil at the top of the pages. 14-year-old kid. My mom got me the subscription to Twilight Zone. It was like opening a new dimension every time I got to look at that, pun intended. Well, Derleth's fascination with Sherlock Holmes, and some of you might be aware of this if you're fans of Derleth or Solar Pons or Sherlock Holmes or H.P. Lovecraft or Arkham House. His fascination with Sherlock Holmes began in his youth, inspiring him to pen his own detective stories as a teenager. By age 16, he had already sold his first tale to Weird Tales magazine, marking the start of a career that would blend mystery, regional history, and the supernatural. And some of his regional stuff's really interesting, too. Really, really good time capsules to get a sense. Same thing with Robert Howard. He has a lot of that stuff, too, down in Texas. He lived in Texas. Derleth's admiration for Holmes led him to attempt writing pastiches, stories imitating Doyle's style and featuring the iconic detective. However, and this is where Solar Pons comes from, his efforts were thwarted when Conan Doyle's estate denied him permission to use the character officially. Undeterred, Derleth channeled his enthusiasm into creating an alternative, Solar Pons, a brilliant sleuth residing at 7B Praed Street in London, and assisted by his companion, Dr. Lyndon Parker. Debuting in 1928 with The Adventure of the Black Narcissus, Pons echoed Holmes in deductive prowess and eccentric habits, but inhabited his own distinct world. Over his lifetime, Derleth produced over 70 Pons adventures, and there are even more because someone else has picked up the mantle officially. They're collected in volumes like In Regarding Sherlock Holmes, that's the first volume, cementing Pons as a beloved pastiche who honored Doyle while forging new ground in detective fiction. His evolution from emulation to innovation showcased Derleth's adaptability and respect for literary traditions. Parallel to his detective pursuits, Derleth was an ardent fan of H.P. Lovecraft. He used to write to him all the time. He became a close correspondent and champion of H.P. Lovecraft's Eldritch Tales. After Lovecraft's death in 1937, Derleth recognized the need to preserve his mentor's legacy. So that's 1937, Derleth born in 1909. So he's a young guy. In 1939, alongside Donald Wandre, we read one of his stories a while back, he co-founded Arkham House in Sioux City, the first publisher dedicated to weird fiction in collected volumes. Their inaugural release, The Outsider and Others, compiled Lovecraft's stories into a hardcover omnibus, ensuring his cosmic horror reached wider audiences. Seriously, if it weren't for Arkham House, if it weren't for him and Donald Wandre, H.P. Lovecraft's legacy might not be the same. Arkham House not only immortalized Lovecraft, but also launched works by other genre luminaries, solidifying Derleth's role as a pivotal figure in horror publishing, probably the most pivotal figure other than the publishers of Weird Tales magazines. Derleth's multifaceted career, encompassing over 100 books, reflected his Sioux City roots, blending Midwestern realism with imaginative escapism. Though controversial for expanding Lovecraft's mythos, he created a lot more monsters and so on. His dedication, and sometimes people think that sort of takes away from the cosmic unknowingness of things. I kind of agree. He left a legacy that bridges detective mastery and otherworldly dread. So that is a little something that I put together about August Derleth. And I want to do honor to August Derleth because, you know, for multiple generations before me, between 1909 and 1971, you know, for many, many decades there, he worked very, very hard as a fan to lift up this type of literature. And now people recognize H.P. Lovecraft. Some of his stories is some of the most beautifully written stuff. He could get wordy, but when he hit it, he really hit it. August Derleth, the same thing. People say, well, you know, he wasn't Conan Doyle. His Solar Pond stories are fantastic. So let me show you a quick example of a little something that you might see of some Solar Ponds action here. Let's see. We're going to go with, oh, and by the way, the person who picked up the Solar Ponds mantle is a man named Basil Copper. Now, Basil Copper wrote, I think, almost as many Solar Ponds stories as August Derleth. So if you go over to the Internet Archive, you'll see the uncollected cases of Solar Ponds. Going to blow this up a little bit for you, okay? And you can see this is over. You can read this free if you want to, or you can get the newly updated versions with David Markham's work. And Markham is a Solar Ponds scholar. He's a Sherlockholmes scholar from Belanger Books, Brian and his brother. And they did the artwork. They're great art people. They're wonderful people. Good, and they live in New Hampshire. You know, Brian lives in New Hampshire. He lives in Manchester. He's a great guy, and totally cool guy. Brian, if you're watching, I love you, man. I'd love to get you on and talk a little bit more about your publications. Just fantastic stuff. So you'll see here the uncollected cases of Solar Ponds. Now, remember Basil Copper, who's on the cover there. He has continued the Solar Pond stories. They are great. Both Basil Copper and August Derleth have got that sense, and they're wonderful adventure stories. They're really, really good. And, you know, they're detection stories. They're mysterious. They're spooky. So let me give you a quick example of what you might find here. Okay. So once more, the most successful of pastiche detectives, Solar Ponds, sets out apace with a new sequence of pulse-stopping adventures. Faithful followers and mystery lovers alike will delight in the superlative sleuth's deductive cunning as they join him and his ever-constant companion, Dr. Lyndon Parker, in chase of crime. Come, journey back to the spine-tingling yesterdays of criminality at its worst and detective work at its best. In turn-of-the-century England, where Solar Ponds, London's most redoubtable hero since Sherlock Holmes, awaits. But make haste, the game is already afoot. So, I will recommend to you a few things, as we're not even in Occult October yet, but keep it in mind, you can find Solar Ponds, not all of it, but some of the Solar Pond stuff is there, but also if you get the chance, go over to Fantastic Fiction, look up August Derleth, take a moment, read a short story. Read one of the Solar Pond stories. And I think you'll find them remarkable. I've got the original copy of that was put out by that company, Futura. I don't have the hardcover. And I also have other versions that, of course, were put out by Belanger Books. So you can check all those out. And you'll see, if you click on the Solar Pond series, you'll see that August Derleth wrote them, but also there's the 8 collections of Solar Pond stories from 1945 to 1998. But then there's Basil Copper. There you go. An English writer and former journalist. And, of course, he continued the Solar Pond stories. So look at the Mike Faraday stories. Those are all his creation. And then Solar Ponds. These are all fantastic. I think you'll love these. He's got a lot of really cool stuff and some dark fantasy stuff as well. So check them out. And Stephen Jones, my buddy Stephen Jones. I didn't even realize this. Stephen Jones edited those and offered an introduction. Stephen, love you, man. Again, Stephen's the guy who, when my first novella, Bite, was going to be released at the World Fantasy Convention in Brighton in 2013, the publishing company actually didn't get the book there when we were supposed to have the breakfast, like champagne and breakfast release. And I didn't get to offer the book for sale in Brighton. I'd flown across the Atlantic for that. And so I went to dinner with F. Paul Wilson and Heather Graham and Tom Monteleone and Heather's husband, Dennis. And, they actually bought me dinner. That was super nice of them on the coastline right next to the Brighton Beach. And super windy that day. And I went back. And as I walked back past the little office that Stephen Jones, who's probably the greatest editor of British horror anthologies in the history of British horror, Stephen's a great, great guy. Stephen was in his office. He said, guard. I was like, hey, Stephen, what's going on? He goes, hey, we heard it. He said, they found your book. I was like, oh, seriously? He goes, yeah. It was in the corner at the publishing company. Your editor went back and got it. And I was like, oh, that's so great. He goes, yeah, he drove back, came back here. And he goes, listen, we have the mass signing tonight where all the authors appear and they autograph the books that people have already purchased. And, our rule is that, we're not going to have the authors hawking their books to the people walking by. It's just people have the books, they go to get them signed by the authors. That's it, He said, but we're going to give you an exception because you weren't able to sell your books today. And I was like, that is so cool. So I sat between Tim Levin and Chris Golden and got to sell my book. And in fact, if you go to my MRC TV bio, the picture that's at my MRC TV bio is actually me at that desk. Let me show you. Let me show you what it looks like. Let me see. I'll show you. It's probably not going to pop it up here. Let me just check this out. Yeah. All right. Yeah, here we go. This is me that day. That's the picture of me finally being able to sell my book thanks to Stephen Jones. So thanks, Stephen. And Chris Golden was over here and Tim Levin was over here. And the Brighton coastline was just over here to the south. I was facing west. So there you go. Yeah, not too far from the English Channel at that one. So yeah. I hope everybody's had a great, great time. Remember, Solar Pons, August Derleth, great stuff. And Basil Copper. It's not Cooper, it's Basil Copper. Copper. Great writing. He has, by the way, I do want to mention one other thing real quick. If you get a chance, Basil Copper has a novel. It's called Necropolis. And boy, whoa, and I think Stephen even has an introduction in this one too. Yeah, he does. Necropolis. This is a heck of a story. Wicked scary, as they say in Dorchester. Dude, wicked piss of scary. It's great stuff. All right, I better get rolling. I hope this has been entertaining for you. Dark days, positive things inside your life. So many wonderful things for writing. And again, I do the political work here because I grew up in that, inculcated with that from my parents, but also inculcated in entertainment, recording of television themes, went to work at 2 television shows, and that's really in my heart. And part of the thing that I've been able to do here, because I've been so sick for quite a while here, has been able to sort of express the libertarian principles, economics, freedom, peace, voluntarism, scholarship on the Constitution, and then deeper than that on true freedom philosophies and history and things, but also trying to run a parallel track to recognize cultural creations and beauty and art. And I've been able to add sort of theological thoughts to that now because of good people like David Knight and others who've brought me closer to the Bible, which has just been wonderful. Jason, all you good guys. So, hopefully this show sort of mixes that together often. And, I want to open it up to you. We'll open it up to open lines some night when we go into BookTube, and we'll just get ideas from you. If you've got ideas for writers or TV shows or movies that really affected you, short stories that you still remember, let's talk about them and get the word out to other people. It's a wonderful thing to be able to support the work of these people, and it won't be forgotten. As I mentioned, one of my favorite YouTube channels, in fact, I'll call it up right now. One of my favorite YouTube channels is called The Worst Thing About New Books. The guy Abe there is a Christian guy who does a lot of really cool reviews of short stories, gaming. He loves D&D gaming, electronic gaming, things like that. And there you go, Clark Ashton Smith. He's got stuff on Clark Ashton Smith right there, more on Clark Ashton Smith. And this is him. He always has the coolest shirts of all time. Now, Abe is suffering from a debilitating disease, and he was diagnosed a while back. In fact, he knows it can be passed on genetically. He chose not to get married and have children because of that. He's spoken about it in his videos. Remember the YouTube channel, The Worst Thing About New Books. I usually watch one of his a night, one every other night. He usually produces one a day or one every couple days. He's got a great schedule. And his voice is being affected a little bit. His movement is being affected a little bit by what he's been afflicted with. But remember the channel, The Worst Thing About New Books. And of course, his motto is, it's based on a French philosopher who said the worst thing about new books is that it makes it hard to remember all and read all the old books. So he tries to keep that in mind. He's done great reviews of the early Doctor Who serials and things like that. And he's a big fan of Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, August Derleth, Arkham House. His knowledge is incredible on those things. Clark Ashton Smith, he's done some top 10 lists that I think you'll find interesting. For example, he's got my 3 top 10 novels right there. So here he is.
To you folks. I hope you guys are having just an absolutely amazing day today.
So yeah, check him out and give him compliments on his outfits too. Abe, love you, dude. We've never been in direct contact. I'd love to get him on the show and talk with him because he's just a stellar creator over at YouTube on BookTube. So thanks, everybody. I wish you all the best. Have a fantastic night. Keep fighting the bad guys in the mode of the occult detectives. We'll talk about those guys soon. Maybe we'll go through some Sumerian September in honor of Michael K. Vaughan. And I'm going to leave you with just our outro from The Outer Limits and honor Joe Stefano and all the guys that with whom I got to work in Vancouver. We now relinquish control and send the control back to you. Have a great night. Don't forget, if you want to support Liberty Conspiracy and what we do, if you're watching on BookTube and you want to support the BookTube work, go to the Gardner Goldsmith Substack and become a monthly subscriber there. That's an easy way to do it for a couple bucks a month, as more people might happen to join in to support what we're doing with scholarship and research and promoting freedom and culture. Hopefully we're a little lighthouse out there for you. So the Russian team and I would appreciate that. And also, if you want to contribute during the show inside Rumble, you can do that. Or you can contribute every month by becoming a subscriber at Rumble. And when the audios of the Liberty Conspiracy show are posted each night at my Substack, you'll see the PayPal link is in there. And there's also another tab on my Substack, the Gardner Goldsmith Substack, that shows you different ways you can support the show, like signing up over at Wise Wolf Gold. I get a percentage of that and so on and so forth. So that's all a great way to contribute. And so hopefully we're doing good work for you here. We'll compare notes more about some of the breaking news of the day. Really amazing time. Just leaves you speechless sometimes. Thanks for being good allies, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Much love. God bless. Remember Abe's channel too. He's a good guy. Take care.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to the outer limits.